Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Grant Thornton, an instinct for growth. BB&T, over 140 years of financial knowledge shared daily. BB&T, member FDIC. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
We live in a real time and a region of transition. No doubt it has not been without real discomfort, but isn't that the hallmark of meaningful change? Welcome again to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and while we have discussed kids in schools for years, going on right now in boardrooms and conferences, at cocktail parties, there's a renewed interest of business in transforming education, and I don't use that word transforming carelessly. Along with the tectonic pressures of a new political and fiscal reality, these relentless dynamics are certainly reshaping our priorities, our social agendas, and the basic structure of our communities. We will start the dialogue about these issues of the day, and later on, CEO of Red Ventures, Rick Elias.
Major funding also by Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte, enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded April 12, 2013. On this week's program, Estherine Davis of Estherine Davis and Associates, Neil McLean of New Carolina, and special guest Rick Elias, CEO and co-founder of Red Ventures. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program, and thank you for watching. Estherine, welcome. Neil, good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Estherine, let me start with you. You know, I talked about, at the beginning of the program, talked a little bit about this education dialogue that's going on. And, you know, for years, education has been a start again, stop again initiative in the Carolinas. You know, we all want the same thing. We want our kids to have a good education. We want good outcomes. We want good economic development. But it seems like there is a renewed sense of priority around specifically K through 12. Am I making that up, or is there something going on here?
I think that you are speaking truthfully. In North Carolina, at the legislature, we are seeing a lot of bills that have been introduced that deal with charter schools as well as digital learning. With the digital learning, they're looking to replace replace textbooks with computers and have that roll out by 2017. We're also seeing with the charter schools, the idea that used to be a cap on charter schools, the cap has been removed.
Meaning the amount of charter schools that can be chartered in any given year in North Carolina.
Yes, so that cap has been removed, and what we're seeing is an increased amount of applications to the charter school, and the different charter schools councils cannot keep up with approval of the applications, so they are understaffed at this point. The caution, though, would be that for each time that there's a renewed interest in the charter schools, the school dollars allocated to each student follows that student to that particular school. So then, you know, the downside of that would be that whatever school the child leaves from to go to the charter school would suffer.
You know, Neil, I want to bring you in on this, because when you talk about charter schools in South Carolina, it tends to be a phrase that I know you know well, and that's school choice. And it's a lightning rod for a lot of folks on both sides of that argument. Same question for Estherine, for you, and that is, is this transformation in education, is this much more than just cocktail party talk? I mean, is there something substantive going on around this?
I think so. I think our business leaders realize that if we are going to continue to grow, we are going to have to do a better job providing kids coming out of our K-12 system that are career ready, college ready, and citizenship ready. We've done a good job in the state of increasing the number of high school graduates, but what we're finding is that coming out of high school, they're still not ready to get right into a job. There's all of this remediation that needs to happen. So for the first time ever, we've got everybody on the bus, the school board administrators, the business community is leading this. School district superintendents are at the table, and they all agree that we need to transform the school system.
So consequently, how do you guys move it from a philosophical, and everyone's nodding their head and everybody's, singing out of the same hymnal. How do you move it from that to real application and real movement? And especially given, North Carolina's working out their budget, have not really finished their budget. South Carolina has the debate going on about transportation or education or economic development or whatever it might be. So I guess, how do you make your case that the priority that education needs the funding that it needs? How do you do that, Esther?
For North Carolina, Governor McCrory rolled out a budget a couple of weeks ago. In his budget, he allocates monies to hire 1,800 additional new teachers. What that tells me is that he's serious about trying to do something with education. When you look at the appropriations bills that are coming out of the House and Senate, the dollars that will be allocated, they're still they have not started the budget process yet, but whenever they do, then you will see the dollars for like the digital learning and for other innovative processes.
Estherine, a lot of people in North Carolina were concerned now with Republicans in charge. They were going to overreach some, especially when it came to the budget, and education would have been a casualty of that. Do you think some of those fears are allayed, that the Republicans have looked at it a little bit harder and more seriously?
I think that over time, especially once a budget is done, that we'll see specifically how true or how sensitive they are or how serious they are about doing things with education, because on the one hand, you do have the bills that are appropriating funds, but on the other hand, in the governor's budget are cuts to the university systems. So anytime you cut funding to different schools, of course, the makeup will come at the cost of higher costs to the students.
So Neil, how do you make your case on education in tight budgetary times?
I think you've got to make it an economic development issue. We've had a lot of success with economic development in South Carolina recently. Boeing has hired 6,000 people over the last 2 years and just announced in this past month that they're going to hire 2,000 more folks. And so you got to make it an economic development and a jobs issue. And that doesn't always happen, I think, when you're communicating with the legislature. So once you can establish that, I think you get their attention. Then you got to ask companies what they need. You got to ask them, are you getting the product that you need to make your company competitive in South Carolina? So that's what we're doing with this Transform SC project.
I almost want to ask you that it seems like Boeing is turning into, in a good way, in a very good way, much like BMW's, and BMW's been the gift that keeps on giving to South Carolina when it comes to economic development and a lot of change. And that would almost give those that are in the State House and those that make public policy some coverage to say, well, we really don't have to do that because companies like Boeing and BMW are already plowing and reinvesting a lot. Does that work against you, or is that a strong point when you see that?
Well, I think that Michelin is a good case study for how economic development has worked well in South Carolina, and then BMW has done the same thing. We hope Boeing does the same thing. Michelin started out with a tire plant, and then they moved their North American headquarters to South Carolina. Then they moved their research and development operation to South Carolina, and all along the way, the universities began developing specialized research programs to support Michelin and the tire suppliers, and now we have 3 major tire companies in South Carolina. So, I mean, it's a case, it doesn't happen overnight. The case builds over time.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're going to bring our guest in who has a lot to say right around the same issue. Next week on this program, he is the Secretary of Transportation in the Palmetto State. Robert St. Onge will be here, among many things that's going on in transportation and transit in South Carolina, and not just South Carolina, but North Carolina as well. And then in 2 weeks, back on this program, the president of Furman University, Rod Smola, will be here as well. You know, sure, our guest represents a hot growth and marketing company, and for sure they are in a group of firms lately that have been announcing new jobs and physical plant growth. But this time, it is about how the CEO takes some of that success and redirects towards social change and social challenges. Education, and not only education, but education specific to innovation, the skills gap, and immigrants. Joining us again is Red Ventures Chief Executive Rick Elias. Rick, welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back, Chris.
You've been hearing this dialogue we have about education. Let me back up. I'm sorry, Rick. I got so many things that I want to get out to you. But let's talk about this Golden Door Initiative. Tell us what this is and how this ties education and the issues around immigration together.
So, if you look at the numbers, there's a big lack of knowledge right now in our society. There's over 1 million undocumented kids under the age of 18 in our country today. Less than 5% of them will ever attend college. And the reason is undocumented kids, even though we put them through primary and secondary school, we shut down most options. They cannot apply as in-state residents. They cannot get federal financial aid, and in some states it's actually legal for them to attend public college. So we have already, since we've been debating the DREAM Act, we've left more than 1 million young adults now fall through the cracks. And we have another 1 million that are going to fall through the cracks, and they don't have a voice. And Golden Doors is trying to give them a voice.
So you've carved out 7 figures to put into a foundation or an endowment of some sort, and you're seeking other like-minded chief executives or those in the commercial enterprises to do that?
Yes, so we're trying to beta this thing in North Carolina, and my hope is that other people in other states want to replicate it. In just 1 month, we had 1 newspaper article, and in 1 month we have 487 applicants. 50 of them had over a 4.0 GPA. These kids aren't going to college. These are our best and brightest. We've educated them through primary and secondary, then we're shutting the doors on them.
So how do you, and I promise I'm going to let you all jump into this. I'm just really fascinated with this whole idea. So Rick, how do you put this benefit out there? How do you tap into that skill and get that resource for this country or this community or whatever the end result is? And how do you not end run the immigration policy or lack of immigration policy that we have in this country?
Well, I don't believe this is an immigration issue. This is a civil rights issue. These kids did not break a law. This is not a political issue to me. These kids, the parents may have broken a law. These kids are innocent. And someone has to, and many people are, but we want to do our part in giving these kids a voice. I think with the Deferred Action Plan that President Obama put in place in the summer, at least it gives a chance to these kids to, once they get their degrees, to actually put those degrees to work, which wasn't the case until last summer.
Mm-hmm. Estherine?
When you talk about job creation, and that's really important right now for the country as well as your state and mine. You've obviously done some great things to create jobs. What are some of the things that you do to survive in this market?
You know, it is, things are changing really fast. I heard a stat that I think that really put everything in perspective. So Moore's law say that technology will change, double. The computational power will double every 18 months. We're currently in the 32nd iteration of that. The next 2 iterations, 32nd and 33rd, which is the next 3 years, will actually match the computational power of the first 31 doublings. We're in a race, man versus machine. We're already lost. And I'm not really sure that we have been awake to see that. And what's going to happen in the next 3 years is it's going to be the beginning of a very different world we're going to live in.
So just to follow up on that, you think our sociology hasn't caught up to our technology?
Absolutely. I think our education system is well behind. What our kids are going to be able to do in the workplace 20 years from now is very different than what we're teaching them in schools today.
Yeah.
We talked before the show, and you said you were getting ready to hire 400 new people. And I've been to your website, and it looks like your company is all about creating a great workplace and attracting young, talented folks. When they get to Red Ventures, are they ready? Are they ready to work, or do you have to train them? And what kind of training do you have to do with them to get them ready to deliver for you?
Our bias and our focus is to bring them in and train them inside of Red Ventures. We would argue that going to Red Ventures for 2 years is like getting your MBA. Mm-hmm. We teach them how to think. We teach them how to problem solve. I think when I look back, hopefully 20, 30 years from now, I will judge our success as to what is our alumni doing out there from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Mm-hmm. So we bring in a lot of young talent that are very, very smart and very eager, very driven, and we'll throw them into the deep end.
Mm-hmm. To follow up on Neil's point, though, Rick, you've got this ease about you when you're talking about bringing all these people in. It's not that easy, though. I mean, how do you find the skills that you need? How do you find, in the case the way you just described it, how do you find the raw materials that just fit the Red Ventures model?
So it is very hard. We are looking for needles in haystacks. And for us is the importance of having world-class facilities, a world-class campus. We announced yesterday a new building, 180,000 square feet in real campus feel, because we have to build a destination for the best and brightest to want to come work at Red Ventures. And we're very aware of that. We want them to think that they are a choice of Google, Facebook, or Red Ventures if I want to stay in the East Coast. That's our aspiration.
Mm-hmm. Estherine?
What advice would you give to other CEOs that are looking to attain the young talent like your company does?
You got to understand this demographic. We're very unorthodox from the sense that we have no org chart, we have no traditional budgets. These kids want to live, play, be free. We track no vacations for most cases. We do lots of things that are very much geared to this generation. Mm-hmm. This is not the way we grew up. And I think we can't expect them to come in and adjust to us. I think we got to create a work environment that adjusts to them.
Yeah.
You say you want to compete with Google and Facebook and others to attract the best and the brightest. Are we doing what we need to do in the Carolinas to create that atmosphere and to make this a destination where, those kids want to come from, West Coast kids, Northeast kids? I mean, is this a desirable place to be?
I think a good start would be to keep our East Coast kids in the East Coast, right? I think it's a stretch or far-fetched to think that we could compete with Facebook or Google today, but I think that just like you said earlier, we need to be doing more and more. So over the next 4, 8, 12 years, we have made up the gap with a lot of these technology firms. And we are partnered up with 7 schools today deeply. Ultimately, we want to be able to affect the curriculum. So when these young professionals come out of school, they're ready to hit the ground running. So more and more that integration will happen, and it has to be driven by a collaboration between schools and companies like us. So I think we got to take the lead in getting these people ready.
So a good question. Is a 4-year degree an asset? Is it needed, and is it an asset? You finished college.
Yeah.
You have a 4-year degree.
Yes.
Graduate as well.
Yes.
Is that an asset?
I think today it is an asset. I think there is a lot that you learn in college about life itself that is not just about a career, that is very, very valuable. I do believe that our education system, I don't think our teachers are well equipped to teach what needs to be taught, and I actually think that curriculum over time is going to really need to change. There is a lot of really interesting stuff, particularly in the West Coast, that is happening. I don't think we're moving fast enough. I think we may have a lost generation of education.
Sorry to interrupt you, Rick. Do you feel like Golden Door could do more than, I want to go back to my first question, Golden Door could do more than just underwrite a child's attendance in a 4-year school, but could influence the way that child or that young person is taught in school? Is that part of the plan?
So part of Golden Door is we're offering them summer internships. We're putting them through a 4-year degree and then giving them summer internships because we want to invest in them. They don't have to come work with us. There's no expectation, but we want them to be leaders. We want them to change the trajectory of their lives, their families, their communities. And these are people that have overcome odds. I just hope my kids end up being like many of these kids. You know, they're just unbelievable souls.
Esther?
I'm changing the subject just
Sure.
a little bit.
Sure.
And I understand that you were on the U.S. Airways flight that
Yeah.
crash landed in the Hudson River.
Yeah.
And that you learned 3 lessons that you learned that
Yeah.
you live by now. Are you still living by those lessons
Absolutely,
that you learned?
and
Okay.
there are a lot more than 3.
I'm sure.
It's a great gift if you can get a guarantee landing on the water. It is.
Well, hopefully not land on the water at all, but to get a guaranteed landing.
Exactly.
What are the 3 lessons?
Well, the lessons in referring to a talk I did is, you know, you really want to make sure that you're living in the now, that you realize that everything will change in an instant. And in that sense, it was hitting a bunch of birds and it changed in an instant. The second thing was to avoid negative energy. You know, you realize as you're coming to the end of your life that we do waste a lot of time on things that do not matter, especially with people that do. And then the last one, it was a clarity to me of what was really important in my life above all, and that was to see my kids grow up and to prioritize my life, even though, you know, we have a very busy life at work. My kids, my family are number one. And that clarity has stayed with me. Those 3 things, it's not perfect, we're humans, but I tell you, it's very, very different.
Well, you know, I think a lot of conservative politicians today try to, especially I know in South Carolina, there's this constant argument about how much involvement government should have in anything. You know, that no government is good, and so then you get back to that question about schools. And so, what should the role of businesses be in schools? Do you view that your business should play a strong role in building better schools, or is that a role of government?
So I'll answer the second part second. I do believe, I'll tell you this, I was talking to Chris, I don't really think that we as a company will be where we are today without the partnership we have with the state of South Carolina, because we were able to build world-class facilities and do things that we would have not done as a standalone company. So I do believe that the partnership between government and private is very, very valuable if the right incentives are put in place for both sides. I think from an education standpoint, we can't wait. We can't wait for education reform to happen from the government down. I think we need to start bringing in from the bottom, and it hopefully meets in the middle. You know, I think we're very cognizant of the fact that we need kids ready in a different way that they're coming out ready now, and we got to do our part.
You know, we've got a couple minutes left, Rick, and you just went through the process. You know, you talked about the head count is increasing. You talked about your physical campus is growing. You were at a press conference with Governor Haley of South Carolina announcing all these great things, and you just finished the process of dealing with the state in South Carolina commerce in this area of incentives. We talk about it on this program from the outside. What was it like on the inside going through the process of incentives? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it like making sausages where you don't want to necessarily see it? Or?
It was our second time around, so I think we all got to the goal line quickly. And then, but you know, it's a very pro-business environment. You got to do your part. You got to create the jobs. You got to put in the infrastructure. You got to make the investments. But I actually will say we've had negotiations with other states. We've gone west and talked to people about opening secondary facilities, and I would argue that it's been a lot more bureaucratic over there.
Is there more growth from Red Ventures coming?
You know, our goal is not to grow. Our goal is to create a great company for the best people. And I think growth is part of that. I think we all want more opportunities. We have more opportunities. We'll grow more this year than we grew the last 3 years, and we've been growing at 40%. So our biggest issue is people.
Wow, that is something. We'll have you back on, and we can talk about how that growth has, you know,
Anytime.
dwarfed this growth. Thank you for being on the program.
Appreciate you having me.
Best of luck going forward. Neil, nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Estherine, thank you for making the trip.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you for watching our program. Next week, as I mentioned, Robert St. Onge, he is the South Carolina Department of Transportation. Until then, we hope all your business is good and that you have a good weekend as well. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Grant Thornton, an instinct for growth. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. BB&T, over 140 years of financial knowledge shared daily. BB&T, member FDIC. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.